my name is Stefan van Laar, like Kelly already mentioned. I work at the Port of Antwerp-Bruges in the sustainable transition team, and more specifically in the hydrogen team. So I have some knowledge on hydrogen, but I also know a thing or two on our broader energy transition strategy. So I will tell you all about it today. So if you have questions, please just indeed put them in the chat or raise your hand, and then Kelly will warn me and I can answer them along the way. Okay, let's go. Yeah. So maybe another question, Kelly, I don't know, there were courses before already. How much introduction do the people around the table, the virtual table, already have on our ports?
I had a general introduction as well on the port, so quite a bit already on the numbers and the strategy. Yes, this has already been explained.
Okay, I will keep it short and won't bore you too much with the same question. So you already know Port of Antwerp-Bruges. It's one port with two platforms, one in Antwerp and one in Bruges, since our merger 2 years ago. You see that here again. I guess you already saw this picture before. It's important to mention again, though, because hello. Welcome. In terms of energy transition, this merger also provides us with quite some advantages, as the platform Antwerp is located around the river Scheldt, so it's actually a fluvial port, the deep sea. If everybody could mute themselves. So fluvial port, deep sea, but our platform in Bruges is really at the sea and gives us some opportunities in terms of LNG, for example, which I will come back to later. Yes, you know this already also. So we're the second largest port in Europe, right after Rotterdam, who are our neighbors not so far away. We're the biggest logistical hub in the range of Hamburg to Le Havre. And important is that we're the largest integrated petrochemical cluster in Europe, and actually even the second largest worldwide after the port of Houston. So quite important. Some numbers you already know. Maybe I will focus on those related to energy mainly. So we're already today a major energy port with, for example, 40 million tons of oil refinery capacity. Today in Antwerp, we have two refineries, one of ExxonMobil, one of Total Energies. We have 7.2 million cube tank storage already. We have 1,000 kilometers of pipelines running through our port that transport a wide variety of products. Amongst others, we actually have the second largest hydrogen pipeline worldwide already today, going from France through Antwerp, through Rotterdam. So that's already in the ground today, and we will complement this, of course, with new pipelines in the future. So this one, the last one you see, is very important with Zeebrugge, but I will come back to that in more detail on one of the next slides, is that we're a very important LNG hub already today. So our role as a port, you know, I think already, we're a regulator. We operate the ports to get things smooth as possible. We're mainly a landlord, so all the companies in our ports, like BASF, like ExxonMobil, you name them, they lease land from us, so we're landlords to them. And more importantly, last one, community builder in terms of energy transition. This is a very important one. So we try to facilitate for our companies, for our platform, the energy transition as much as possible. We get people together, we have contacts with governments, etc. So zooming in on our Antwerp platform, which I already mentioned, it's the second largest petrochemical cluster worldwide after the port of Houston. which guarantees a stable supply of feedstock, raw materials, and intermediates. The pipelines I mentioned, 1,000 kilometers already today, so there's a very large amount of connectivity within our ports, which gives us advantages of importing and for the import and production of chemical commodities for Northwest European markets. There are many leading companies, chemical companies in Antwerp. You see on the right, you see a map with a couple of numbers. Below, you see the numbers. So it's really the BASF, Ineos, Air Liquide, Borealis, you name them. It's the large chemical companies of this world. They are all active since many, many years in our port in Antwerp. We're very well connected within the port, but also towards our neighboring countries. We are a logistic hub with very well connected through rail and barge, for example. So gives us a special connection to Germany amongst others. But Germany is very important partner for us. So I briefly touched upon this one already. This is our platform of Zeebrugge that you see, and you see here, I don't know if you see my mouse, four, actually, 1, 2, 3, 4 LNG terminals. They're owned and operated by Fluxys. Fluxys is our gas pipeline operator today and also the hydrogen network operator of the future. They were appointed last year or in the course of this year as our HNO, so they will play an important role for hydrogen in the future. And through this terminal, we actually supply 15% of the EU gas market already today, in form of LNG, of course. Since 2022, right, when the Russian-Ukrainian war broke out, this became even more the case because Germany was all of a sudden, of course, cut off from Russian gas through the Nord Stream 1 pipeline. So we became an even more important supplier to the German market. Fluxys is even expanding its plans for additional natural gas throughput and future energy carriers, but with in mind already the energy transition. So everything they're building new today, they're trying to build hydrogen ready. So new pipelines that go in the ground will be hydrogen ready for hydrogen transportation in the future, for example. Also here you see this small island with some sand. There are plans potentially for the future to build an ammonia terminal there. So ammonia as a hydrogen carrier, and then there it can be cracked again to hydrogen to put in the pipeline and to be supplied to the Belgian market, but also the European market. Yep. Okay, just a nice picture. Some more numbers. I think I touched upon most of them already, but maybe, of course, we're the second largest petrochemical cluster in the world. We have a lot of traffic, both in ships and in trucks through our ports. That comes at a price, of course. It's not for free. And the price you see here is on the right bottom one is actually our ports, our two platforms together, they emit today 18 million tons of CO2 emissions today. So I think if you would translate that into a percentage for Belgium as a whole, it's probably around 20% of total emissions, something like that, of Belgium. So it's quite substantial. So we want to keep our position as a leading chemical hub, but of course we want to tackle that problem. That's what you see here. Voila. We want to get rid of the 80 million tons of CO2 while remaining our position as a maritime throughput for liquid bulk, while keeping our chemical cluster and while keeping our maritime throughput of LNG. We will use our pipelines for this, and our tank storage will be instrumental to achieve this climate transition. Up. and we will green, of course, our platforms. So much for the introduction. So what is our strategy to achieve this climate transition today? So our climate strategy is based on 4 pillars. You see here the 4 circles that all have their own focus. So on the left, we have energy efficiency in heat and electrification, because the best energy still is today the energy you don't use. It's the best thing you can do is save energy through efficiency. So that's a very important pillar of our climate transition strategy. For the energy we cannot save and we have to use, we have the second pillar. It's our fuel transition pillar. So we have a lot of ships coming into our ports. We have a fleet of our own, of course, that today mainly go on very heavy fuels, very polluting fuels. And in these fuels, we want to transition away from the heavy fuels towards more sustainable options, like maybe in first instance natural gas, but in a second phase electrification, hydrogen, methanol, ammonia. So this is our second pillar. Then in the blue one, the third one, we need to provide more sustainable feedstocks. Our chemical cluster uses, for example, a lot of hydrogen already today. I think it's around 400 kilotons of hydrogen already being used in our port. But of course, today it's not green hydrogen, it's gray hydrogen with a very large carbon footprint. So if we want to achieve our climate strategy, our climate goals, we need to also provide our platform with more sustainable feedstocks. And then on the right, we have a couple of industries or companies that emit a lot of CO2 that cannot use hydrogen or cannot electrify, and they will have to be looking at carbon capture and storage, so CCS, in the future to lower their emissions. Of course, these 4 pillars, they overlap here and there. For example, if you have a gray hydrogen production unit and you apply CCS to it, you also get sustainable hydrogen. So that would be an overlap here. So this is not only theory, and it looks good on paper maybe, but this is already also being implemented in practice, as you see here. So for every of these pillars, we're already on the ground working on projects. You see a lot of names here. Don't try to memorize them. It's just project names within these pillars. And I will zoom in for every pillar on one of these projects to give you an example on what we are doing already today in our port. No questions so far? Kelly?
No,
I
don't
guess
see
it's a
anything.
no. Okay, perfect. So, for our first pillar of energy efficiency, I want to give you the example of the Antwerp North Heat Network. So we have within our port we have Innaver. You see here, it's actually waste incinerator. So it collects the household waste of our city, of all the people living in the city, and it tries to get energy out of it. So it's been doing that for a long time. But the byproduct of this process is, of course, the heat that comes out because of the incineration. And for a long time, this heat that was a high temperature heat that could be very useful, but it was not put to use. So it was just vented to the air, while actually you could valorate this heat and put it to a good use. So in this project, so Heat Network Antwerp North, so the slide is in Dutch. The heat of Indaver is captured and actually put into a new heat network, so heat pipelines, and connected to, in first phase, Boormalt, which is a malting company that actually uses heat and that can put this heat to use. So it buys the heat from Indaver and uses the heat, applies it into their processes. So the heat does not go to waste. In a second phase, it's also the goal to connect Innaver and the heat network to the city of Antwerp, actually. So it's the north of Antwerp. So that's why it's called Heat Network North of Antwerp. There is a residential area there that could be connected through this heat network, and so houses and apartments could be heated with the waste heat of Innaver instead of burning fossil fuels to heat these houses. So what you see here is that it could save up to 80,000 tons of CO2 per year, this project. So this is clearly one of the examples of our efficiency pillar. We had heat, it was gone to waste, and now we try to valorize this heat and give it a more efficient and useful application. If you have a look at the energy pillars, so trying to shift away from fossil fuels for our maritime fleet, for ships entering our ports. One of the major projects we're working on is the project of the multi-fuel port. I will also zoom in on this one. It's a complex slide or a busy slide, but I will walk you through it. Let's start on the right here in the top right. So to fuel these ships mainly, we will need molecules, right? These molecules will mainly be imported. So that's why Port of Antwerp Bruges has the ambition to become a hydrogen import hub. I will come back to that near the end of the presentation. But we will basically import any molecules, sustainable green molecules that could be put to use in our ships and other applications like hydrogen, ammonia, methanol, and maybe in the first phase also methane, because it's also a cleaner fuel than the heavy fuels that is used today. Some part might be locally produced. In Zeebrugge, we have a 25 megawatt hydrogen production plant that took FID 2 or 3 weeks ago. So there will also be some local hydrogen production within our port that can be supplied to the ships. Okay, so there will be a piping network, of course, to transport this hydrogen. What you see here is a hydrogen refueling station. Actually, we already have since more than 5 years, I think, a hydrogen refueling station at 100 meters or 200 meters of our Port Authority building. It's owned by CMB Tech, and it's actually the first hydrogen refueling station in the world where cars, trucks, and ships can tank hydrogen. So we have that today already in operation since a couple of years. So here trucks could refuel. Then the pipelines could also go somewhere towards the ships. For the smaller vessels, we can have a truck to vessel, truck to ship bunkering. So bunkering is just a word of tanking, fueling the ships. So here we have a truck to vessel, a truck to ship bunkering operation for the smaller ships. But the large container ships, those are the ones that come most often in our port with a lot of containers on it. So it's really the biggest container ships worldwide. We use ship-to-ship bunkering. So it's a bunkering ship that will refuel the container ship while the container ship is being unloaded or loaded. So this is what we call SIMOPS. It's simultaneous operations. It's something we strive for. It's not easy. It's not evident, but we're working on it. How this works. Because, for example, if we want to bunker a ship with ammonia is a bit more dangerous than the conventional heavy fuels. So the safety parameter would have to be a bit bigger. And on this K, of course, a lot of people are walking, people are operating the cranes, etc. So we found a plan or worked out a plan how we can do this simultaneous bunkering of the ship while unloading the containers. In the next slide, I have a good example of the first case where we successfully did this. Then On the left side, you see OPS. It's onshore power supply because, of course, for example, cruise ships that are in our ports and waiting for the tourists to come back, they use a lot of diesel generators to supply electricity to their ship, and this creates a lot of emissions as well. So we provide now, we had the intention to provide onshore power supply, which is of course far less pollutant than diesel generators. Certainly, if this offshore power supply would be fed with windmills, for example. So for the larger ships, this is a plan we're working on. For the inland vessels, the ones you see here, the smaller ships, and that inland navigation, we already have this onshore power supply installed in our port. And then lastly, for the smaller ships, the inland vessels, we are also working on infrastructure for battery containers and hydrogen containers. So instead of fueling the ship with hydrogen and waiting for a long time, actually the container is already fueled with hydrogen, and then the container is just put on the ship and it runs on this hydrogen. The same goes for the battery. So this is our multi-fuel port, what it looks like, what we're working on already in action today. We will see on the next slides. So this is the Anna Maersk, is one of the largest container vessels worldwide, who was in our port some months ago, 2 or 3 months ago, and it was actually bunkered, ship-to-ship bunkering. This is a bunkering vessel with more than 4,000 tons of biomethanol with the grade of 100% bio some months ago. And it was done, like I said, in simultaneous operations. So bunkering, refilling the ship with fuel, while at the same time unloading the containers and putting on other containers. The entire operation lasted for 24 hours, which is actually a good time. So an example of our multi-fuel port in action. I check the time. Okay, still on time. Yes. So coming to the third pillar, sorry, is sustainable feedstock and circularity. I will zoom in on our next gen demo or next gen district in our ports. So next gen districts, maybe a small piece of historical information. It's I think 90 hectares in our port that used to be a car factory, so owned and operated by Opel, but it went bankrupt 15 years ago already, and since then actually we had some terrains coming back to the ports as we are the landlord, and we have been thinking about how can we put this terrains, these spots into good use, and how does it fit into our energy transition strategy, our climate strategy. So what we wanted to do is keep these terrains for circular activities and energy transition activities only. So you see the plot here, and you see the plot 3 times. We actually made a reservation within the plot for next-gen demos. So companies, startups with a technology that is already in a demonstration phase, but not yet on industrial level, can contact us and get here a spot to demonstrate their new technologies. One example is, for example, a hydrogen electrolyzer builder who wants to demonstrate their new electrolysis technology here, and they have contacted us and they will start up their new demonstrator. We will also provide this plot with some facilities. So it's the Next Gen Park. So there will be offices built for the entire plot where all the companies can sit together. These offices will also be modular. They will be put to use at all time. But then the biggest part is the next gen. So this is actually when the demonstrator is done and you can take the next step towards industrial scale, or immediately you already have a technology on industrial scale. You can build your technology here on our next gen district. For example, we have a company that will recycle old tires from cars. We have a company that will start up there and do some recycling of mattresses, so where we sleep on mattresses. We also have Plug Power, which is a hydrogen production company. They will build a 100 megawatt hydrogen production plant on our next gen demo. Oh, sorry. So this is our next gen plans, and it fits right into the pillar of circularity and sustainable feedstocks. Coming to our carbon plans, you see the CO2 hub we plan to be. It's overlapping partly with the feedstock, but it's mainly focused on carbon capture and storage. We have some big plans for becoming a CO2 hub in Belgium and also for the rest of Europe. You see it here. It's also a busy slide. Let's start on the right side. So I already mentioned we have a large petrochemical cluster. There are a couple of companies looking to electrify, a couple of companies looking at hydrogen to decarbonize, but we also certainly have companies that will have to look at carbon capture and storage to decarbonize their operations, because hydrogen is not an option and electrification is not an option. So they will capture their CO2, and we have the intention of creating a CO2 backbone in our ports. So the companies can put it in the backbone, and then we transfer it to a liquefaction storage unit. So we make it liquid CO2. It is then stored in a tank, and then it could be shipped off to permanent storage, for example, in the Netherlands, or for example, in Norway, under the North Sea in old natural gas fields. In the longer run, we could also do this through pipelines, but of course, these pipelines needs to be built towards the Netherlands. You see next gen again here, so it's a district. There also will be some CCU. So once the carbon is captured, the CO2 is captured, we can also put it to use on the next gen district, because there will be certain companies looking to reuse the carbon. So this is the Antwerp platform, or the Antwerp Bruges platform. Of course, we are also looking at what we call the hinterland. Mainly Germany. The Ruhr area is the industrial heart of Germany. They also have a lot of CO2 emissions that will be captured there and then put on a train or rail or barge to bring to Antwerp. And then we have the same two. We have the same two possibilities. Either we liquefy it and transfer it via ship, or we compress it in gaseous form and put it into a pipeline for permanent CO2 storage. For example, Northern Lights in Norway is one of these empty gas fields many companies are looking at to store their CO2. In the future, also import CO2 by ship could be possible from places further away that have CO2 and want to get rid of it through our ports. So this is our Antwerp Sea carbon hub, what we call. Putting everything together in one slide, I maybe won't go too much into detail, but it's all our plans together. It looks like this. We have in our port already 140 wind turbines, for example, generating renewable electricity. We will put this renewable electricity to use directly if possible, or convert it to hydrogen if needed. We will have hydrogen imported from places far away. I will come back to this in a moment. We have CO2 being captured on our platform and then stored underground in the North Sea. Yes, hydrogen carriers again coming in. So this is a bit the entire chain you see in our ports. And then if we imported the hydrogen and other derivatives, we can transfer them to North Rhine-Westphalia, hinterland, Germany, everybody who needs it, we can supply the renewable molecules to. So I mentioned in the beginning, I work in the sustainable transition team, but more specifically in the hydrogen team. So coming to my niche or my specialty, I would say, is the Port of Antwerp as a hydrogen hub. What you see here is our roadmap or 2030 roadmap for hydrogen based on 3 pillars. I'm looking at supply, where we will get our hydrogen and other derivatives of hydrogen like methanol or ammonia. What are the infrastructure needs in our port? And last but not least, where is the offtake? Where are the consumers of this hydrogen, of this green hydrogen, with our chemical cluster, of course, is one of the important destinations for this hydrogen. I will break up this this picture in a couple of parts so we can go through them a bit easier. So supply, infrastructure, offtake, and here you see the timeline going from today to 2030, what we want to achieve. In terms of supply, I mentioned in the beginning during the multi-fuel port that a small part will be produced locally. I had mentioned the 25 megawatt plant in Zeebrugge. But of course, to produce renewable hydrogen, you need renewable electricity. And for renewable electricity, you need a lot of sun and wind. I don't know if you've ever been to Belgium. We don't have that much sun. We have some wind, but also limited. So our potential for hydrogen production in Belgium is quite limited. We will never be self-sufficient. So that means we will have to look outwards for our renewable molecule supply, and we will have to import this hydrogen and derivatives. Already today, we created a hydrogen import coalition with a couple of key players like Exmar, Engie, Fluxys, and we had a study done to look, is it economically and technically feasible to have large-scale hydrogen import from, let's say, Oman or India or Chile to Belgium. And we already did that in 2021, I think, and then we had also an update last year. So this is publicly available, showing that it is possible for one, and it is also possible at a cost competitive price. Local production, I already mentioned. We hope to see the project in Zeebrugge operational by 2026. But then by 2027, we really want to have these first imports by ship from countries far away coming to our port in different carriers, either e-methane, ammonia, methanol, or liquid organic hydrogen carriers. And then we scale this up, of course, towards 2030. So first smaller imports by 27 and larger imports by 2030 and beyond, of course, even more scaling up. This is the supply. I mentioned this already. This is the production plant in Zeebrugge. It's called High of Wind. On next gen, we have plug power. We'll supply 100 megawatts also. We will also have blue hydrogen, so meaning gray hydrogen with carbon capture. Antwerp at Sea is one of the most important projects here. And I think I mentioned already the other things. So the Hydrogen Import Coalition, you see the players involved here who did the study and who built the roadmap. What countries are we looking at for this supply of hydrogen? You see the ones in red, those are our main targets, let's say. It's not an exhaustive list, so all the other countries are also interesting. We don't discriminate. Every country can supply hydrogen to us, but the ones in red are the countries we have the most collaboration today already with, or we have MOUs with, or we see as most feasible. So in short, it's North of America, so Canada and US, with Houston as a very important partner. We're looking at Brazil, where we have a stake in Porto do Açu, so we are a partly owner of a port there as well. Looking at Chile very much. Morocco is very important to us because they're on the sweet spot of combining sun and wind power, so could lead to very cheap prices of hydrogen production. Namibia is very important. Egypt, Oman, India, and Australia in a lesser extent because it's really, really far away, and we don't know if the molecules will ever reach our ports, but we do hope so, of course. So not non-exhaustive list of countries. Yes, maybe important also to mention. I work for the Port of Antwerp Bruges. We also have a subsidiary called Port of Antwerp Bruges International. They focus on providing consultancy services to countries worldwide on port development. So they will help developing countries, not only developing countries, but mainly developing countries in building out new ports. They give advice on how do you build a new port, where do you need to build the terminals, for example, for hydrogen in the future. Where do you build the pipelines? How do you build a quay? So this is what they are doing. They can provide you with consultancy services. And for example, one of the most concrete projects they're doing is Hyport Duqm. Duqm is in Oman. They're part of that port project. And also a newer one is Namibia, where they want to build a port called Namport that could be developed to be a hydrogen exporting hub towards Antwerp in the future. Second pillar is infrastructure, very, very important, of course, to make this hydrogen economy a reality. Most of the hydrogen coming to Antwerp won't be in the form of pure hydrogen. It will be in a carrier like NH3 is ammonia, for example. This ammonia can be used directly by certain industries that require ammonia, like fertilizer companies. But most of the time, the ammonia will have to be cracked again towards hydrogen. So we have one company, Air Liquide, who is demonstrating already today on a small scale this cracking technology. Actually, they opened or they had their first opening event yesterday of the cracker. It's small scale, but they're looking to scale it up in the future. And we have other companies working on cracking facilities and also terminals, of course, with companies like Vopak, Advario, all looking to build large ammonia or methanol tanks to receive these molecules once they are shipped to Antwerp. And hopefully by 2027, they will be ready to accommodate or welcome these first ships. And in 2030, at large scale, new tanks will be built, new storage capacity will be built in our ports. Simultaneously, pipelines, of course, have to be developed. I mentioned we already have the second largest hydrogen pipeline running through our country today. This is a privately owned network by Air Liquide, but we have Fluxys as our hydrogen network operator, who will build an open access network in parallel to this network throughout our ports, but also connecting Belgium internally and connecting us to Germany, hopefully by 2028. Like you see here, we want to make the connection to Germany so we can also supply the molecules to the rest of Europe with Germany as the main target. So I mentioned here already, these are the companies who have concrete projects in terms of terminaling. Fluxys and Advaria have a project together. We have VTTI, we have Vopak, and we have Air Liquide. And these are the ones who communicated openly. We know behind the scenes there are a couple of other companies also working on terminaling. So this is not non-exhaustive. Pipelines I already mentioned being built. In addition to our 1,000 kilometers of pipelines already today in our port. Maybe some numbers. So you see a picture of Belgium here. The green lines is the Fluxys network that will be built, the open access hydrogen pipeline network that will be built. In the first phase, it will be connecting Ghent and Antwerp. So in Ghent, we have a large steel factory that requires hydrogen. In Antwerp, we have our chemical cluster. They will connect them, and internally within the ports, they will connect them with pipelines. And then the second phase, like I mentioned, is this one, 2028, hopefully to connect to Germany. You see that we will import 45 terawatt hours by 2030 and 275 terawatt hours by 2050. It's mainly 1/3 to consume locally in Belgium and 2/3, like you see here, for throughput to Germany. So 15 terawatt hours here and 30 will be throughput to Germany. Coming to the last one, I think I already briefly touched upon it. Our largely is offtake, and we can import all the molecules, all the hydrogen we want. But of course, you need a customer, you need someone who wants to take off the molecules. We have some demonstration projects ourselves that use hydrogen. For example, we have a tugboat. We call it the Hydro Tug that runs on hydrogen that is already running on green hydrogen today. It's of course small, but we want to upscale it and buy a couple of more. But this is, of course, small scale. The large scale offtake will come from our big chemical companies like BASF, like the refineries of Total and ExxonMobil, and like the steel company in Ghent, for example. And then also in Germany, of course, there's a large potential offtake in the Ruhr area with a lot of industrial activity. Yes. Okay, I think I mentioned this. Yeah, of course, also mobility, the mobility sector, transport sector is a potential off-taker of hydrogen with a lot of trucks driving through our ports, and they have to drive long distances, which is not always possible in battery trucks because they will have to charge, and charging takes a lot of time. So for long distances, hydrogen trucks might become a potential off-taker. And then, of course, also marine. I already mentioned ships bunkering methanol or ammonia with our multi-fuel port concept will also become a large off-taker in our ports. You see a picture here of our hydro tug. This runs with a dual fuel engine that can run partly on diesel, partly on hydrogen. So it's a bit like a plug-in electric vehicle that gives you the comfort of always being able to fall back on diesel if there is no charging station or there's no hydrogen available. So this is already running in our port since a couple of years. Okay, I think I went maybe a bit too fast, 45 minutes, but this was my presentation. I don't know if there's any questions. I see one hand.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, excuse me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, thanks for your sharing today, but I have two questions for you. So, the first one is I know that in the port of Antwerp and Bruges, there are many projects for energy transition. So, but I wonder, can you share me more about what is the challenge and the difficulty when you implementing that project? For example, from the government, from the infrastructure, from the facility, and how you can solve the port authority can solve that problem.
Yeah, so I showed indeed a lot of projects. That doesn't mean these projects are very easy to implement and we don't run into any problems. Many problems are often related to politics, policy, legislation. So one service we try to offer to our companies on our platform is that together we target the government and flag these problems, and we say, okay, for example, in terms of permitting, it takes too long. It's difficult to get a permit, and then we try to work together with the government to solve these issues. Another issue is, of course, money. All these projects cost a lot of money. We already have our companies are already experiencing a lot of pressure from international competition, etc., high energy prices. So these sustainability projects or climate projects, they cost an additional amount of money. So we try to get also some funding from the government, for example, to make these projects reality. So I don't know if you have any other specific problems in mind for this question, because it's a rather broad question, of course.
Yes, thank you. So, for more detail about the politics, so it means that the Brussels country have the specific rules for the port to implement that project, right? Or how they can how you can solve that politics problem?
Yeah, not specifically rules only for the ports. The rules would apply to Belgium as a whole, but we do try to have some lobby work or advocacy work towards the government, who is not always aware of this project of these problems, these legislative problems, and then we try to fix them together with them. You could indeed, one of the ideas that goes around is, if you see the ports as an entire area, as an industrial area, you could, for example, provide with more flexible permitting rules within the port, because it's an industrial area where there's a lot of projects. There is no civilians living there, so you could be a bit more flexible on in terms of safety or permitting.
Yes, thank you. So about the money problem, so as you mentioned, the climate change is a very expensive change. Uh, that's a big challenge of this project. So you said that the port authority connect with some of the fund from the government to collect the money, right? How about the joint venture with other company to invest the investor to make it?
Of course, yeah, that's also um, we try to enable as much as possible collaborations between our companies. For example, the CO2 network I mentioned, it's a very large, expensive infrastructure, and the more companies connecting to it and contributing to it, of course, the cost goes down for everybody. So that's what we try to do. We try to pool the demand, let's say, try to get everybody on board, and then the entire cost of the infrastructure can be shared amongst more companies, and it gets lower for each company, the price to pay.
Yeah. So two big problems solved and another specific problem, and I think it's about the okay. It depends on the project, right? So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Then we'll leave it at this. First of all, Stefan, thank you very, very much for this interesting session.
Thank
I
you.
also want to add that on green hydrogen, APEC also has a separate course for the first time this year. So if there's anyone who wants to take a very deep dive into the, the green hydrogen supply chain and production, all of that, then that is also possible with APEC. I don't know, Stefan, if you want to add something else or no?
No, not exactly. I can share the slides, or is that usually not done? I don't know.
Yes, please. If you can share the
Yeah.
slides so we can share them with the participants. Absolutely.
Yeah, I will send them to you. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you
See
very
you.
much. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
See
Bye.
you then. Yes, okay.
Bye.
Yes.
We see you in
Thank you.
Antwerp.
Okay, see you. Yes.
See you.
Yeah.
See you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Bye bye.
Yeah.